Welcome to the webinar series titled How to Thrive in the Supply Chain Revolution. My name is Josh Shinani, partner in charge of the Manufacturing and Distribution Group at SaaS LLP. SaaS is a multidisciplinary accounting, tax, and advisory firm headquartered in Clifton, New Jersey, and the M&D industry is the biggest vertical we serve. We're also one of the top 10 fastest growing firms in the country, as identified by Accounting Today and recognized as a top 5 all-growth firm in the Northeast by Inside Public Accounting. I have the pleasure of being joined today by my good friend, Sandy Vosk, founder and CEO of Advantage Technology Solutions, a leading technology provider in the warehouse and logistics industry. Sandy is also the co-founder of the Supply Chain Experts Group, a tri-state networking group of individuals who service all aspects of the supply chain designed to share industry knowledge and create opportunities for one another. Ongoing technological advances and increasing customer demands are transforming the supply chain industry at an unprecedented pace. To be successful in this rapidly changing business environment, your company will need to consider new and better ways to meet customer requirements and allocate the right people and resources quickly, efficiently, and profitably. SaaS's manufacturing and distribution practice has joined forces with Advantage Technology Solutions to provide you essential, need-to-know insights from industry experts on technology and the supply chain revolution. We hope to help you expand your customer base, enhance your revenue stream, and optimize the operational efficiency, profitability, and security of your business. Throughout these webinars, we will be joined by other supply chain experts who will bring knowledge, expertise, and experience to the topics presented. For more information about these webinars, please go to www.saxllp.com, News and Events page for the full details and registration links. Today's webinar, the make or break decision, selecting and implementing the right software. And now, my good friend, Sandy Vosk.
Thank you, Josh. It's a real pleasure to be back and joining you today for really a critical topic, I think, at this time. Because we're in the supply chain revolution, everybody, no matter where they are, is looking at managing some change. Whether you're brand new out of the gate in a hot startup business, you've been in a strong business for many, many years, but you're still running on some legacy systems, somehow, somewhere, you're going to need to make some new decisions, and that's what today's about, and we're trying to help folks about. So we're going to focus on financial systems, accounting, and enterprise resource planning, talk a little bit about what's the difference between a premise-based system, those that are on your site, versus a hosted, versus software as a service, and then keys to success. You know, how do you go about making the decisions today? So next. Keep going. So what I want to start with is accounting versus ERP. And I kind of like the picture because we'll just kind of look at the left hand being accounting systems and the right hand being ERP.
Are you saying, Sandy, that accounting people are boring and
Absolutely, other than yourself. But seriously, accounting is a foundational product for a company, right? And it's a little bit of plain vanilla. Would you agree, Josh? I mean,
I would agree. I would agree, and people do associate, not to poke fun, most accountants of being plain vanilla, but truth be told, you know, accounting is the crux of what holds everything together, right? Think about why we get into business in the first place. It's about making money. It's about managing the business effectively.
And I believe that companies already who've invested, who have good accounting systems, the majority may not need to change them. There's a lot of work involved in moving to a new accounting system and changing chart of accounts. But there are reasons that companies have to sometimes. And one of those is because of growth, and if they're larger and they're really playing in a global supply chain game, more than accounting, general ledger, payables, receivables are required. Then budgeting, forecasting. What if you're doing international and need to have multiple languages, multiple currencies? You may have a sales or a customer sales, marketing, or customer service management system today, siloed or combined, but if it's not directly connected with your accounting system, there are probably some inconsistencies between the two.
Yeah, I think you're right, Sandy, and we're going to talk about it later, but really the importance of integration here as it relates to all these systems, allowing different areas of the business to talk to each other can only have long-term positive benefits.
And even more so with your customers today. And that's where integrated order processing, how you take orders from them, how you fulfill them, how you're on top of the inventory, those are critical components that could either be another silo or they could be part of the system.
Right.
And last but not least, certainly, human resources, managing people and projects. It's always about that. And ERP systems can have all of this under one umbrella, a single version of the truth. So that's how I look at the distinctions between the two.
It's amazing how many times human resources, and I'm glad that you included that on this list. It's kind of forgotten, but really it's one of the most important factors of the business.
So the other important factor is, this is why, to me, it's really important that people are knowledgeable. You have to be an educated consumer, because no two companies are the same. And you have to really understand where you're coming from and what do you need next. You might be on an accounting system, or you may be looking at a new accounting system or a new ERP system. You may not have integrated manufacturing or any supply chain management system, end to end. Managing from sourcing all the way to delivery and back. On our last webinar, remember, reverse logistics.
Sure.
Then integrated, customer relationship management, inventory management. But here's where some of the drivers are in our series: digital communications to your customer. There's still so many companies that are not communicating electronically, and that is inefficient. There's also risk. Food Safety Modernization Act, if you're not tracking end to end, and God forbid you have a recall, it'd be critical to have that kind of level of tracking. So it's not only be able to communicate digitally, let your customers do the work. Portals, having electronic portals. Your customers can see their own information. Some of them even place their own orders. So this all is the game now to be competitive. Then you have order processing and fulfillment. How do I take orders from my customers, my salespeople, electronically? What about Shopify and Magento if I really want to play this game? How do I fulfill it profitably? And therefore, you have to know what you're doing and what you need, not down to the dotted line, but a high level, which we'll get into next.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of drive Sandy's point home here, technology touches every single aspect of your business.
So I'm not going to go through every box, but I used to tease I was going to do a Cheech and Chong webinar about the cloud, like, hey, man, because the cloud is cloudy. We all act like it's, yeah, we know what it is, but it's not. And especially from a software vendor perspective, it could be really cloudy. What's the difference between you owning your own software and managing it on your own premise versus you owning your software and letting somebody else manage it for you versus what they call the cloud, software as a service, which is subscription-based. You're paying a certain amount per month per user. And of course, there are pros and cons to everything. But I firmly believe, and we've been in some clients together, prospects together, it's getting harder and harder and harder to support this stuff. And if you don't have the right team, capability, internal or through managed services, you could be at real risk. So a lot of companies may like to own the software, feel it's a better financial decision, but can't support it. They could be looking at a hosted environment where they still own it. Software as a service, if you're a startup and you don't have the money, you want to pay a predictable amount each month, that's to me how I kind of look at it.
And Sandy, I think, and I think this is where it all starts, right? We talked about accounting being the crux of the business, right? Absent good financial process and good financial reporting, the business itself doesn't have the wherewithal, the information to make sound business decisions. So you just laid out a lot of options. And there are certain tax benefits that come with bonus depreciation. But really it's understanding your budget, understanding the numbers where they are today, understanding the numbers where they're going to be a year from now, good budgeting, good forecasting. That's what helps you make those kinds of decisions. And, again, you have to look forward. You have to say, am I going to have multi locations, right? Because our businesses are expanding. They're expanding within the United States. They're expanding overseas. Dealing with different people in different time zones, different time frames, all require different financial technological setups. So really, these are big, high-level decisions that can't be made on a whim and really should be made with, and you'll touch on it later, your trusted advisors, because this has a big financial impact to the business, not only today, but in the future.
It's huge, and we'll get into it. I'm so glad you mentioned it. But I would say just one thing before we move to the next slide. It used to be challenging enough to decide, should I go with Microsoft or SAP or Oracle? But just off your point, right, what you just said, it's not even a question of that. You have to understand what does even Microsoft offer. Great Plains is a perfect product for some companies versus Navision, versus Exapta. So there are different levels of software even within one vendor. And really gets cloudy is it overlaps. They don't just have this, they have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Oh, I can get a little bit of that, and then you can get lost in thinking you're getting something wonderful, but it doesn't match what you need. So that's why I got through the keys to success. And this is really what the heart of today, right? How do companies make these decisions in the supply chain revolution? And the more things change, the more core truths, universal truths remain. And one of those is these 5 criteria are keys to success. When you look at projects that succeed, they're done. When you look at projects that fail, one of these or more of these are not in place. And today, as you said before, the decisions are not just could be a bad business decision. It could be catastrophic, because especially if you're lost in a bad ERP implementation and the money starts rolling and you're way over budget and your employees are unhappy and some of them are leaving.
I think you're speaking from passion, right? And
no, I am.
Passion comes from experience, and I could sit on this side of the table too, Sandy, and say, I've seen disasters, and when I tell you they're not pretty, they're not pretty.
No, and I am passionate because I come at this with like an Amazon-like perspective of customer obsession. And so I really, for anyone that I'm working with, I'm really trying to help them navigate through this tsunami. So that's a good point. Let me just say on this, one of the most important things all of them are important. I don't want to skim on one. Executive leadership, if you don't have top buy-in, it's not going to succeed. The executive's got to be in it from beginning to end, supporting the team. And that's the second most important thing, a cross-functional team. Decision can't be made just by finance, can't be made just by executive. Everybody has to be involved in understanding what's out there and making the right decision. And that high-level requirements that's why it is. So you understand your requirements from all angles and you don't miss something that's critical. Then a detailed analysis of the vendors, which I'll show you in a few minutes, with due diligence, my definition of due diligence, and part of that is a comprehensive implementation plan.
And I wanna just add one more thing to that too, Sandy, is that there needs to be across the board a cultural commitment to change, right? Because as we've seen, working with our clients, that everybody has to be on board with this, because if the owner stops it, the whole process stops, and if the people in the warehouse stop it, in the end, who's affected? The customer, right? Because if the customer's not happy, we don't have a business. So everybody has to buy into this.
It is the critical component. You'll see a line I have after, but it's not about the technology. It's about managing change. And that is all about culture and understanding how you motivate people to move from A to B and do that efficiently and with satisfaction, employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction. Right. And this is why it's not just internal anymore. You need to use trusted advisors like we do, because nobody could be on top of everything anymore. It's changing too quickly. And even if you have resources within, they're buried. They're buried in your internal, your customers. They may know a little, but a little enough to be dangerous in a decision of this magnitude. Put them all together in a process that we'll talk about next, and now you have the formula for success.
Right, and we are, you think about our world that we live in, we are trusted advisors. But if you think about today's day and age, the world has become so complicated that even expertise has become very siloed. So I'm glad that it doesn't say trusted advisor, but it says trusted advisors, because you really need to come at this with multiple people handling multiple aspects. So that's a great point.
And the more complex the business, the more you need, right?
Absolutely.
Go ahead. So I've created, this is the first of 3 slides, that's why it says phase 1 of how to go about this. We're in a phase with the supply chain revolution where they used to talk about, and some companies still go through a traditional RFP process, request for proposal. It's my professional opinion, there's no time to do that anymore. A, by the time you go through that process, your business has changed. But B, and this right off your point, and it's not meant to be disrespectful in any way, people don't really know what they need. And therefore, I've created a process which begins with this cross-functional team of internal and external resources. A lot of times it's IT for external, but could be other aspects as well. And to begin with high-level function requirements, understanding that.
So, Cindy, let me ask you why, and I'm laughing because I understand the importance of this, and it's something that's commonly not done. Cindy, why is it important to document your high-level requirements?
If I tell you how many companies, I won't put a percentage, but a large majority of companies start with demos. And if you're using an older system, or if you're just using QuickBooks and Excel, and you a lot of manual effort to get stuff done, all of the new systems look good. They have a nice GUI, graphic user interface, makes it easy to navigate, nice reports. They're always going to look a lot better than what you have. And it's easy to go, oh my God, that's great. But you don't really know yet what you really need. So that's how companies can get already down a path of looking for one thing and really needing something else. That could even be like John and I spoke last week from warehouse management and warehouse control systems. What do I really need? Do I need software? Do I need hardware? Do I need something both? But what I do is we go through and begin with the team, interviews, separate interviews with each one, visiting the facilities, technical assessment. Oh, I want to have my own premise-based software. Oh my God, you're not capable. I would suggest you move to hosted immediately because you're at risk, right? We just saw someone like that. Then document the requirements, present it to the team. Then we start phase 2.
So do you normally find when you interview people that the responses you get are usually consistent, or do you find that they're all over the place and all across the board?
Very rarely A, more about B, because everybody's looking at through their slice, right? When you take that cross-functional team, I tend to do a lot with third-party logistics companies. Every company I go to, there's a wall physically and mentally between the office and the warehouse. So that's just like, how does the warehouse look at things versus how does the office look at things? We could just have a whole webinar on that.
Sure. So if you're giving advice to a company, right? And they're kind of undertaking this process. How do you navigate through what's important and what's not?
Cool. Let's go to the next slide. So this is how I begin. So once I've gotten the vendor requirements the high-level requirements, and we've gone through that process, companies have software. Companies have already interviewed a couple of vendors. They may have been, their buddies or their network may have suggested a few. So I already put together, okay, let's start with about 5, 6 that we start with. That kind of match what you need, kind of, but let's just start there. And so what we do then is start to get detailed functional requirements, right? With management interviews and the gap analysis and targeting initial vendors, I've done that. Then we start bringing in demos. Now's the time to look at a demo with the full team. And let's just look at a high-level vision of this demo. Let's use ERP as an example.
Right.
What's the main menu look like? How do I get into accounting? How do I do order entry? How do I get reports? How does billing happen? But on a very, very high level.
Right.
And one of the things that we do with all of those demos after each one is get a survey, which is part quantitative and part qualitative of what everybody thought of that demo.
So you're saying after each demo, it's important to conduct an individual survey. Why is that?
Everyone in that room, through their eyes, is going to look at it differently. May be great for accounting, may be horrible from a point of order entry or any other component. I don't like the CRM function. Can't I just use my Salesforce.com? Sure you can. No one says you have to replace Salesforce.com. Great point there, right?
Yeah.
Second part is we try and do these quickly. So let's say we had 5 demos. The same group of people looking at demo 1, by the time they get to demo 2, 3, 4, 5.
They're all the same.
No. Right. Well, they kind of blend.
Okay.
You if you don't do surveys,
right.
What was in vendor 1 versus what was in vendor 2. But the other reason is for scoring accurately, they're smarter with vendor 2 because they've now seen 2 demos, 3 demos, 4 demos, 5 demos. That group is much wiser on the 5th demo. Whether or not that software is better than the first one, they're going to think so because they're asking better questions and looking at it deeper. Not always, but they're wiser. So you have to kind of capture information,
right,
and then filter it, interpret it, analyze
right.
it, so that you move forward to then look at more detailed requirements. So once we kind of go through those 5, 6, get some scorecards. Some of it maybe forget them, we don't like them, they're not really what we're looking for. You get 4, maybe somebody else popped up that we hadn't thought about. We bring somebody else in. Now we have more knowledge and awareness of what those vendors offer. Now we could drill into the departmental, individual, core team viewpoints of that. And that's what the functional demos are, right?
Right. So what's the difference then between an initial demo and a functional demo?
So first of all, people can only absorb over a specific time. This is heavy stuff. There's no way you're going through every function of any of these in an hour or even an hour and a half, right? So once you kind of get the high level, finance alone needs let's go through every function
right.
of finance.
Sure.
Let's go through now, every function of order processing. So those individual groups start looking about how do those functions work in this software. And when they start looking at software 1 versus 2 versus 3 versus 4, there are going to be real differences of what those do as compared to what they do today and what they need to do tomorrow.
And just going through this process, right? It creates just a heightened awareness about capabilities for all the folks that are in the room, or?
Absolutely. This isn't rehearsed. That's just so great. Yes, because even in that first round, right, by the 5th, so you come in with some preconceived notions of what stuff does, and then you start listening, and then there's conversation. You mean that can do that? Oh my God, if that could do that, we could now save blah, 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 $100,000, or we can now bring in this new piece of business. oh my goodness, I didn't even know that was a requirement that we needed.
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing, even, when I sit in my own experience and think about discussions with clients and they go through this process, they spend all this money to implement these systems and they're not using the capabilities, to the fullest capacity that they can. So it's almost refreshing to go through this on a new experience, but even I'm thinking the existing software that they're using, they don't know the capabilities of.
No, and that makes it even more challenging when you're trying to migrate from one to another.
Right.
Oh, go back, please. I want to just say something on that previous one. So part of this, and when we go through the functional demos, is really matching that to your customers' requirements. What do my customers need, right? And workflow. How does this now enable me to reduce paper, reduce time, generate innovation in terms of sharing information internally and externally? Training, culture. How easy is this going to be to learn? Can I learn it? Does somebody have to come on site? Can we schedule, training after hours? Is there e-learning? Every vendor is going to have differences in how they can provide that. And the last, and then I'll come back, the quality of support. It's not just about putting it in. It's about who's going to be there when there's a problem or you have a new piece of business that this is not a purchase, it's a partnership.
You said customer about 5 times in a 30-second span. How? I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this question to you, but does the customer play a role in this process, right? Is it important when when you're thinking about undertaking a change like this, to involve the customer in this process? I know historically maybe that's not something that's been done, but if in the end they're the end user, they're the one that pay the bills, they're the ones that keep you in business.
So that's such a great question, and there's a couple of ways to respond to that. In this phase, I don't usually bring customers in. I believe it's challenging enough between the core team of internal and some trusted advisors to pull that together. Having said that, though, sales is a critical piece, and understanding what customers need and matching those needs in whatever decisions are going to be made. More importantly, customer obsession, managing change. Whatever you think is going to happen is not going to happen. So you could have the greatest implementation plan. We were talking about a specific case study of mine, yesterday, and in that case, they had an implementation plan. One of the reasons they were making this decision was to keep a customer that was threatening to leave. Well, not only did that become an important factor in their decision, normally we wouldn't have taken on. This is a pure e-commerce customer with EDI and labeling. I mean, this was probably like one of the most complex, and we had to bring it in early in the project. So you must deal with customers one way or the other because customers are your business, right?
Right.
So this is kind of the heart of the matter in terms of, vendor selection process. So you go through all of this, you continue to take surveys, you continue, and you try and get down to 3. And you know what? As you go through this process, the companies that want to do it, you can get stuck in paralysis of analysis. There's a need to move through the process. And it becomes pretty apparent who the top 3. If not, then you work it and you get deeper in deeper functional demos or deeper your requirements, or on this sheet, right, you start looking at coordinating day in the life demos. It's not what's happening at average. Can the systems support you at peak? Great, it hums every day, but November, December, oh my God, it's at its knees. That's no good. So then you start looking, do they offer on-premise, hosted, or cloud? What is it going to take to migrate from what I have today? What capabilities do they have to communicate electronically? APIs, EDI, and the heart of this, if I leave people with one thing today, it's not about purchasing the software, it's about implementing the software. And therefore, too many companies sign a contract without having clarity as to what that implementation plan is going to be. And if it's, we used an example before of a seven-figure, piece of software, $2 million, and I said it used to be an average of 2 times that, another $4 million for professional services. And just use whatever numbers you want. That starts going out of whack, and
yeah. So I've got to ask you, right? Because I'm sitting here listening to you, and I've got a lot of questions. Because the questions that I normally get here is, look, this is a big undertaking. It takes people away from doing what they need to do. Sandy, what is a typical implementation of a new system look like? I want to know timeline, usability. Do I run the new software and the old software at the same time? Let's start there.
So there's no one answer because everyone is different, and it's all about where you're coming from and what do you need next. But for an ERP, the RFP timeline was about a year to make a selection. I've worked with major manufacturing distribution companies who've gone through the selection process in 6 months, sophisticated with deep due diligence, which we'll talk next, and then implemented within the next 6 months. From an accounting perspective, you start with accounting. There's a lot, and the timing of that is critical, right?
100%.
What time of year, based on, all of those things. So, but it can be done, and with the right plan. Companies have blown it. A great example of blowing this, not to pick on anybody, but Hershey's many, many years ago implemented an ERP system in September. Nightmare, blew Halloween.
Right.
So timing is important, right? Getting things in if you really want to start the new year with it, then going through the proper analysis, getting everything ready, and then transitioning. You're going to want to run accounting in parallel for a bit, right?
Right. And then once, and that's a good point, because someone may turn around and say, well, there's never a good time, right? We're always busy, but you made some good points, on a year end where we're not going to potentially lose any information that the accountants need. That's usually the best time, and that's usually what I suggest as well. So the question is, okay, so we spent all this money, we implemented the new system. 2 things. 1, what do I do with the old system? Does it just stay there? Does it get thrown away? And 2, what information do I need to migrate from the old system to the new system? I know my thoughts I'm going to share, but what are your thoughts?
From an accounting perspective especially, there's a need to maintain the old system. But what you want to do is in your migration process, migrate from data entry in the old system to data entry in the new system. But you don't bring all the old history. It's almost impossible to bring all the old history from a different vendor into a new platform. You can migrate certain things, you can bring over chart of account, but you're building something new.
Yeah, I think from a management standpoint, being able to look at least 2 years information side by side. So if we're starting anew for one, maybe we carry the prior 12 months. Yeah, I would agree with that. Cause
I even asked somebody, a cousin of mine, by the way, who worked for NetSuite, said, what happens in a software as a service situation and you want to leave? What do? You don't have it anymore. You keep one license so that you have access to all that data, because all you need is access to the information to export, right, for historical purposes,
sure,
which you could then do whatever comparisons that you need to, but you need access.
Yes, and the history is very important, not only from an internal trend analysis type perspective, but God forbid one day the IRS comes knocking at the door, you need to be able to provide certain support. So that information does become very important.
And also this comes down to, and this is not to sell my services, whatever trusted advisor somebody uses, the vendor is not going to get you all the way through here.
Right.
Vendors know their software. They're not always the best change management experts in every industry. Especially in ERP, it's not just picking the right software. You got to pick what they call a value-added reseller, a VAR, that specializes in your industry.
Right.
Otherwise, what do they know about what you do, right? I just want to, before we move off that slide, due diligence, my definition of due diligence. So, in the world we live in now, everything's changing faster and faster. You may think you've found the right software. You may think this now fits in beautifully. It's the right price point, the right budget. You need to know for sure, because of the criticalness of the investment. You need to know about the vendor. You know, who are they? The depth of the organization, the quality of their support, their commitment to be in business, or their potential acquisition. That might change things. You may not know everything, but if you don't ask, you don't know. And then customer calls or visits. I developed a script. You'd be shocked how, it's another great nugget for this webinar. Ask other people before you buy. They'll be happy to share with you what their experience was, what were the positives, the benefits, the negatives. And therefore, you're much wiser. And in some cases, the more go visit. Don't just do it over the phone, see them. They're not going to share proprietary information, but they'll share what they went through in this process, because that's just the way I found it.
And that's a great point, because the best time, effort, and money you spend, you'll spend up front. Because if you don't go through this process and you don't treat it equally as important, if not more important than the implementation, potentially the changes you make could be, you know, your demise here. So if you plan to fail,
failing to plan.
If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
One last thing on this, and then we'll move on. You come up with 1A and 1B, not one. Because what if you've made the great decision and now they failed due diligence? You don't want to go back to step one. You want to already know that B is still there, ready to execute, right? So that's not just a single vendor due diligence. Okay, let's move on. So how do you, sorry.
No.
Were you going to say something?
You know, what are your priorities here? I mean, how do you make a decision?
Yeah, I apologize. I jumped ahead of you. It is about your individual priorities, right? And going back to culture, I love it. People, it's culture. You know, what functionality meets each department's needs? How easy is this going to be to use? It could be the greatest functionality in the world. Everybody's scratching their head. It's not intuitive. It doesn't help me do my job, right? Then you can get into architecture. You know, hey, I want to have software as a service. What kind of wide area network connection do you have? Oh, I got a 15 megabit pipe. You're not going to be able to do that, right? So you have to have infrastructure to support whatever you want. And then the vendor. And this one, total cost of ownership, you know.
Yeah, and I'm glad, you know, again, putting my accounting hat on here, I'm more than happy to see this, because you're right. After we spend that money up front to acquire the system, right, we've considered budgeting, forecasting, strategic plan. Well, my cost going forward is just the license cost, right? So it's minimal. Wrong. A lot of times when we sit with management, they don't actually understand this piece of it, right? It's hardware, it's software, annual maintenance, outsourced professional services, internal support, insurance, right? Because God forbid, and we've seen what happened when things go wrong, and the cost to not only bring back data, but the cost of lost revenue. So you've got to think of all these things in terms of a true financial cost to the agency.
And you said something before that was really important here. It's about commitment, right? So many companies lack the internal support that's necessary. And yeah, we could do it. No, we can't. You know, yes, we may have, I got Josh, I got Sandy, I got Margaret, but, you know, Josh, Sandy, and Margaret are doing 18 other things. Right. You know, they're going to be able to get this done at the speed that you need it to get done, you know. So, and if you don't, that's when Now the budget starts, because now you didn't expect, you're already thinking, oh my God, I'm paying this vendor too much money. Now you can't get it done and you gotta pay them even more,
Yeah,
right?
and in past history, the budget never goes down, it only goes up.
And that's why it's not about the technology, it's about managing change.
Right.
And that commitment from the company, right from the top. The executive leadership has to buy in and give that team the support it needs to get the job done.
Right. We're talking about long-term ROI here.
Okay?
Okay, so just a couple questions to kind of wrap this up. So, Sandy, you talked about premise-based, hosted, software as a service. What's the difference, and how do I decide here?
I kind of skimmed on, we talked a little bit about it before, but, on-premise means you have your own servers, everything's connected, and there's a lot of benefits to that. If the internet's down, you're still running, right? So it's not a bad decision, but you have to be able to support it. Support the hardware, support the software, support security protection, prevention, and intrusion, but to really be able to protect your assets, right? And if not, I've had some want to buy. Buy is a better decision in the long term. Then maybe you want to look at hosting it. Amazon is not making all the money that we think they are on Prime and buying products. The majority of their profitability comes from Amazon Web Services,
Right.
hosting.
Right.
So does Microsoft, Azure, hosting. That's why, now you could do it through the vendor, or you could do it yourself. Again, that's mouth goes in that. But I'll say this, whether it's hosted or software as a service, you're not giving up accountability. You're moving the responsibility.
And never losing control, right? Because
it's your business.
That's right.
Your data. You need to know and ensure they're matching your service level requirements and agreements that you sign with them.
Absolutely.
Responsiveness.
Because in the end, where does the finger get pointed?
Right.
Right back at you. And so just to wrap up, I want to say thank you to my good friend Sandy. Sandy, really enjoyed the conversation today. Leave the audience with one final thought.
This is a thought. It's hard today, harder than ever. I'm in the industry close to 4 decades. I'm more humble than ever because of the pace of change. You can't get stuck as a deer in headlights. Even if you're not sure which way you want to go, you're going to have to move. Labor costs are going up. Shipping costs are going up. Customer expectations are rising. So staying in the same place is not a safe place to be. So therefore, it's about following a process that's proven and makes sense for you and your company. Don't hesitate to take the time and bring in the resources to help you in that decision.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of leave you with this too. Sure, there's a big cost associated with this. There's no denying that. But think about 2 things here. Think about the customer experience, because if they're not getting the right experience from you, they'll go somewhere else. And we've talked about it at length. The customer is your pipeline. The second thing is that if you think about the world we live in today, everybody wants to create value for their business, right? What is my business worth? If I go out and sell it, if I give it to the next generation, the number one driver to increasing value to your company is the technology that it holds. So, again, there may be a big cost involved today, but you have to think about the future. Thank you. To register for upcoming pre-recorded webinars, please contact Margaret Henn. For questions or more information on selecting and implementing the right software, please contact myself or Sandy Vosk. Thank you.